Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Doom. That's me. Today I'm joined by two of my friends who are also my colleagues, Barbara Storella. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
And the Reverend Dr. Susan Lee. Good morning, Susan.
Morning.
So I'm really excited to have my guests here with us today because they were instrumental in founding a group that I belong to called BU Votes. And we're going to talk about how that got started and the implications of this election. Before I do that, I would like to show everyone what I have here. So let me switch over here. So the election is now over. Today is November 14th. We know that the former Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, is now the president-elect. And I wanted to take a look at how the Electoral College changed, because that may be part of our conversation at some point. When the electors met in December of 2016, Donald Trump was awarded 304 electoral votes and Hillary Clinton 227. There were 7 what are known as faithless electors that switched to their votes on the day of the meeting of the Electoral College. There were 2 Trump voters that switched their votes, and there were 5 Clinton voters that switched their votes. And you can see the list here: Clinton, Trump, Colin Powell, Spotted Eagle, who was the first Native American woman ever to receive a presidential electoral vote. Ron Paul, John Kasich, and Bernie Sanders each received a vote. Things looked a little bit different this time around. Here you see the now president-elect Joe Biden has won 306 electoral votes to the sitting president Donald Trump's 232. So not quite a mirror of 2016, because Joe Biden will end with 2 more electoral votes than Donald Trump received. So, as I said, my friends and my guests are 2 of the principal founders of BU Votes. And either one of you can start, but do you want to share with us why BU Votes got started, what the idea was? Susan, you could start.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. BU Votes got started at the College of General Studies, where I teach, and Dr. Lynch and Mrs. Storella work as well. For several years, every time we had a national election, we ran a voter registration event at CGS, and Barbara was a big help with that. And Dr. Lynch also helped me with that a lot. And I think it was maybe in 2016, no, I think it was 2018. In 2018, we ran a voter registration event again at College of General Studies. It was in our front lobby. And we had students coming in and out from all different parts of the university. And we helped a lot of people to register, taught them a lot about getting an absentee ballot. We just had students pouring through all day long. We ran it for 2 days. And often the students would say, what a great idea this is. How come they're not doing this in my college? And so that gave me and Barbara the idea, wow, this should happen all across the university. Mm-hmm. And I probably had too much coffee that day. When I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
In the enthusiasm of all that voter registration, we said, let's do it. Let's get it all over the university. Yeah. So that was kind of the kernel of the idea. And we started talking with other people about it. In 2019, Dr. Lynch and I went to talk to the Dean of Students to see if he would be interested in being involved. He was very enthusiastic about it. One thing and another, it came to our initial meeting in October 2019, where we invited people from across the university to come talk about the possibility of voter registration events in 2020 in preparation for this presidential election. Mm-hmm. And we got a lot of interest from different people across the university. The School of Social Work was there, Residence Life was there, the Wheelock School of Education, CAS, as well as people from CGS. And there were a lot of students as well. Mm-hmm. So it was staff, faculty, students, administrators, all mm-hmm. came together. We had representative from the Dean of Students office. Everyone came together to say, yeah, let's do voter registration across the university. So in January 2020, we ran a very successful event across Boston University, many different locations, many different colleges. Sororities got involved, Residence Life was involved. I can't remember how many we did, but it was probably like 35 separate events to register students to vote in January to February 2020. Mm-hmm.
And
And so
that was for the primary
that
elections,
was
right?
for the primary, which was March 4th, but there were also primaries across the country.
Mm,
Many students were registering by absentee ballot.
mm,
And so they were voting in different places across the country.
mhm.
So then our plan was, that was February 2020, our plan was to do the same thing in September 2020 to
Mm.
register students for the general election. But of course, COVID intervened. And so we had to go online. And so we did do voter registration events in September and October, but it was much more subdued than what we would have done otherwise.
Yeah, and we did it on Zoom.
And
And
we did it on Zoom. We did it on Zoom.
however, I'm actually tomorrow, I'm interviewing Marina Pence.
Good.
And
Okay.
I think that she said that we registered about 300 people all told. Is that right?
Because we were using TurboVote,
Yeah,
which university subscribes to, and then we directed students to TurboVote to register or to look up their registration information, find out information about ordering an absentee ballot. So a lot of students were going to that TurboVote, and then the dean of students office could track how many students went to TurboVote and how many registered.
right.
And so there were 300, but I do think our reach was really much bigger than that
Oh, I agree.
because students didn't necessarily go to TurboVote. We were giving people information. They could have gone directly to their state election website. There were also a lot of posters up all across campus that the students put up that were also directing students to register to vote. And so I think there were at least 300 students.
Oh, I agree.
More.
Well, and the other thing too is we did do some work with voter groups at other universities too, and like at Northeastern.
Well,
And I think that that made a difference.
yeah, definitely.
Barbara,
It was, well, Barbara, go ahead, and then I want to talk a little more about the other universities.
all right. No, Susan, go ahead, and then I'll ask Barbara what I was going to ask her.
Okay, well, I'll say when we started this in 2018, 2019, honestly, I felt like a voice crying in the wilderness. I felt like no one else was doing it. So
Mhm.
2018, I looked around to see where else at Boston University had voter registration happened. It was clear it had happened. It had happened a little bit, but not very much. I didn't hear anything about anyone trying to get students registered to vote.
Right.
And I thought this was so important to do,
Yeah.
to engage students in the political process, in civic engagement as they're in college, to help them develop a habit of voting. And so since students come in to college about 18 years old, the vast majority have not voted before. And so it's during their college time that they're going to vote for the first time.
Right.
I just thought this is a great opportunity to get voter participation up by
Yeah.
encouraging college students to develop the habit of voting. But when we started, I couldn't hear of anyone else doing it. And so by the time we came around to fall 2019, and actually, I think it was already 2020. I think it wasn't even in 2019. It was in 2020. We started to hear about efforts at other colleges. We started to hear what Harvard was doing, Northeastern,
Yeah.
Tufts, UMass Boston. A lot of interest in other colleges was developing quite rapidly.
Yeah.
And then Boston Votes developed. So we are BU Votes, BU at our own university. But then there's Boston Votes that brings together students, staff, faculty from colleges across the greater Boston area to do what we are doing at BU. And so it just mushroomed in 2020 from summer to fall 2020. It really mushroomed in terms of the universities that were involved, the students that were involved. You could see that this was an idea that was waiting to happen. And I was just so glad to have been part of it, and also to have BU be part of it as well.
Me too, and CGS.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara, you did a lot of the groundwork when BU got started, helping the students, getting things set up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you, what it meant to you, what you learned from working with the students and all, and the registration and all that?
Well, starting with Susan, she's such a dynamo. When she came to me and said, I would like to do BU voter registration, which wasn't available at the time for anyone, I said, okay, let's, it started out like in the ground roots. We had 3 tables in the lobby with, flags and swags and get the attention of the students to come in, because we really wanted to corral them in and get them, involved. And it was our first time, and Susan's amazing. So I set up the lobby. The students came in and they were like interested in, oh, what's going on, and they hadn't had this opportunity before. So we set up the computers, told them, get on BU votes. Where are you from? If you're from another state, you want to, vote from Massachusetts. But if you're from another state, you could vote from your state, which would probably make a bigger impact one way or the other. So and we weren't, it wasn't Republican or Democrat. It was whatever you wanted, independent. And I could see the enthusiasm in the students, how they were excited about the opportunity, and they didn't know how to go about it. They didn't know that you could just fill out this form in the beginning, and we give them the stamps and mail it off for them, so we can guarantee that it will go to their states. And because they didn't know, where's the post office, where's the stamps, so we worked with them on the ground roots of it and showing them how they could approach the election process. It seemed to excite them. It really was exciting. And I think they appreciated the fact that people were taking an effort to get them started.
Yeah.
So this was the ground roots. The first time we had our table. We've done it like 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah.
So it was exciting to see them get excited. And then, I think it made a difference to them because they felt they were involved again. They were involved with the election process.
Yeah.
And when we first started, we were the only one at BU that we knew of that was offering this. And people from other schools would come in and say, how come our school isn't offering us this, And Susan said to me, this is unusual. Why don't we, try to reach out to the other schools? So that was the beginning. And then as we progressed, each time we'd have one, we'd get more and more interest. And we realized that the kids, especially with the election now, it was such a big election, that students were really getting engaged. So I think just having the access for the students and showing them in that little 3 tables in the lobby made a difference for us. And then we had all the computers out for them. We got to learn how easier, much better we could work with the BU votes and what was online to offer them. And I just was really excited because Susan did start this in her way. She's a dynamo. And I was grateful to have it and really honored to help her.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. And one of the things that I know you enjoyed, and Susan and we all enjoy, is getting to work with the students in this way. One of the things that I learned, or have learned in the last few years, is that the students just haven't been educated on how any of this works. And once you offer to do it, they're very eager. But there are many students who were never taught and don't, and if no one offers to show them, they might not look into it. So really what I learned is there's a desperate thirst for knowledge about all of this. And I've also learned from my work with Better Elections Now, and when I did stuff for Northeastern and for BU Votes, there is a growing bitterness among them that they weren't told. There is a real frustration that no one educated them on how this is all supposed to work and what a good citizen is. And, and I think that part of that comes from all that they lost this year. I mean, we all lost so much, but our freshmen, for example, were not allowed to go to London, and as they were supposed to do in the summer. And that was a crushing blow. That was a really tough day. And I never will forget getting that message, which for some reason we got at like 10 at night, having to face the students the next day on Zoom and say, I'm really sorry. And so I think that the good thing about all the bad things this year is that it has motivated them. I really think that they want, and they're working hard. And, we worked with Marina, with Tingwei Lee, and there were a few other students who just did phenomenal work. And I think, they're there. We just have to find them and get them what they need to get started. And I think that's one of the things BU Votes has done very well.
What I've heard, Dr. Lynch, is that that there's less civic education in American public schools than there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, here in Massachusetts, they have the MCAS requirements. That's math and English. And that I think civic education has fallen, fallen through the cracks a little.
Mm.
It's not being required on tests. It's been brushed aside.
Mm.
And a really important part of a democracy is having people involved, and they have to be taught to be involved. So I think that there's a larger structural context for the ignorance of the students about the process and for their eagerness to be involved, and in that they did not get education, which at one time was standard in American high schools. So there are a lot of barriers for students to be involved, and that was one of the challenges that we faced, was trying to help students surmount those barriers. Just the fact that our national elections are so decentralized. It isn't even 50 states. Within each state, there's municipalities, there's counties. When we first started registering students and helping them apply for absentee ballots, Barbara and I didn't realize how complicated it was to get an absentee ballot. That in some states, every county has their own process. And so we had to find the county the students lived in, and then what was the process for getting an absentee ballot. And a lot of the students didn't even know what their county was. We had to say, okay, call your mom and find out what county you're in. And help them get an absentee ballot. So there are, and then a lot of things are not. Now, I think one of the benefits of the past few months, when we've been under COVID lockdown, more things have gone online than used to be. However, there's still a lot of the voter registration process that can't be done online. It has to be done by mailing in a paper form of some sort. And a lot of students, they don't know where stamps are, as Barbara said. They don't know how to put a stamp on an envelope. They don't know where the mailboxes are. All those things constitute real barriers to students voting.
Yeah, it's a real frustration, because now the short answer from my own education and study and experience is that public education was destroyed on purpose, because we had the best public education system in the world. So why would you dismantle it? Well, because you needed to impose a political and economic system called neoliberalism that doesn't make any sense. So if you destroy public education, if you divorce people from knowing how to fight back politically, which was done by destroying civic education, then you can impose neoliberalism and loot the country for 40 years. I mean, that's what happened. And that's, I'm going to do a video on that because it's my, my main thrust these days is neoliberalism. But it was literally done to impose an economic system that allowed the rich to loot the country. And the way that you do that is discourage voting at all turns, however you can. And actually, there was a guy, and I'm going to get his last name wrong, but it was Paul Weyrich, I think his last name was, in the 1980s, who supported Reagan. And he came out right out and said, we don't want people to vote. We want to make sure that only our people can vote.
Well, we heard that much more recently from President Trump.
Yeah.
About vote by mail. It says, well, if everyone can vote by mail, Republicans would never win.
Right.
Well, that's not true, first of all.
Right.
But it also shows kind of the fear of having a widespread involvement of the electorate.
Yeah, exactly right. Because these days, the reality is the Republican Party only wins nationwide when it cheats. That's just the reality. And they're very good at it. And one of the things that I'm very frustrated about, which I keep bringing up to the students, is this. Imagine that you were going to play football and you get to the field and the other team arrives and your coach says, go out there and give it a good game, guys. Now they're going to win because they always cheat, but you go out there and you fight hard. What? Yeah, they're going to win because they always cheat, but you go fight as hard as you can. It's nonsensical that they haven't been stopped. And so phase one of that is getting people registered and getting people in the system, even when it's really difficult. And Republicans went out of their way to make it really difficult this time. And you all both heard me say this repeatedly as well. High voter turnout can temporarily overcome the dysfunction so that we can catch our breath and do something. And that's what happened. I think we probably have the highest voter turnout in the history of the country. Now, that's a good thing.
The vote totals, were so much bigger this time.
Yeah.
In 2016, you had 65 million for Clinton, 62 million for Trump. And this year, is it Biden up to 74 million? And I think Trump
77.
1 million, 77 million? Oh,
Trump is, I'm sorry, Biden is 77 and Trump, I think, is 72.
yeah, well, that's just that's millions and millions more people than
Yeah.
voted
Yes.
last time, and some of those were young voters. So
Yeah.
I haven't seen the final figures of how many more young voters there were, but
Yeah.
young voters made the difference in a lot of areas. For instance, Georgia.
Yeah.
So close. Young voters came out to vote, and especially young voters of color.
Yeah.
So the Black youth vote in Georgia really expanded quite a bit, and it was very much skewed towards Biden. And
Yeah.
so if you look at Biden's win in Georgia, I think one of the factors you have to look at is the strength of the young Black vote
Absolutely.
going out to vote, and especially young Black women, but young Black men as well.
Yeah. And
On the other hand, another thing that the Georgia picture brings up is that there really is a racial difference in the election too, which is very disturbing. You know, there's a racial pattern where whites tended to vote for Trump, whereas Blacks, by a much stronger margin, voted for Biden. And so there's a clear racial disparity. You know, the only group of white people that voted for Biden were female college graduates and the youngest white voters, especially female voters. The young male white voters voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And so there's both this age and gender and race pattern in the electorate, which is really just fascinating.
Yeah, and frustrating.
As a white person, I really, as a white person who supported Biden, of course, BU votes is nonpartisan, but my own personal opinion was that I was hoping that Biden would win. And I felt, you know, what I really didn't like about President Trump is his racism. And I felt that so many white people voting for Trump kind of brushed aside that issue of racism and said either it's not so important or it's not so bad, or, you know, they really agreed with it. And I just felt very bad about all those things. You know, I think racism is a huge problem in our country and all of us have to fight it. But there was a racial pattern in this election that was really disturbing.
Well, what I don't understand is how the worst president in history increased his vote. Like,
Well,
you know, that's a real problem. Trump was defeated. Trump was defeated, but Trumpism wasn't.
It's true. The Democrats hope for repudiation of Trump's attitudes, and he was not repudiated.
No,
you know,
and really and that is on the Democrats because they didn't offer a message other than Trump is awful, right? I mean, they didn't offer any alternative. They just said Trump's bad, vote for me.
I think they did have some things. You know, they had healthcare, COVID. You know, we have to deal with COVID better. They did have some issues, racism. You know, we have to deal with racism. There was a message there, but there were issues with campaigning in the COVID era. You know,
that's certainly true.
We couldn't have rallies. You know, people couldn't be out in the streets nearly as much as they would have been otherwise. And we do have to say that Trump is very effective at promoting his perspective.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that unfortunately, the reality is the worst president in history has some political instinct that seems to work. And
we could say he has a lot of political instinct.
Yeah. And it's just been astonishing to sit here and watch. You know, none of this will ever make any sense to me, to be quite frank. Yeah, Barbara.
I think they did reject Trump in the fact that the Republicans won the Senate seats, but they rejected Trump. That made me feel comfortable. And he did lose by 5 million votes, which was good also. And I just was so fearful of his re-election for the COVID because we could all die from him because he won't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that all the blue states would not be counted for anything for federal grants or anything. He would just have taken on the people that voted for him, and everybody else would have been decimated. So I was fearful, actually anxiety and fearful of his if he ever got reelected. I think Biden will roll over him like no tomorrow. He'll be
Yeah,
fabulous.
Biden will be fine. And I really, really believe he will only serve one term. And that's the smart move here.
Mhm.
You know, the smart move is be the uniter, be the guy that stabilizes the ship, you know, and then in 2 years after the 2022 elections, I'm going to stand down and Kamala Harris is going to run. And that's, you know, that's the right thing to do. There is leader after leader after leader in Europe who stayed a year, 2, 3 years longer than they should have. And they, you know, for example, Helmut Kohl, he was hailed as the greatest leader ever because he brought German reunification.
Mhm.
He should have quit because when he left office a few years later, it was in disgrace and with the cloud of scandal over him, right? So it's what I hope is that Joe Biden has his 4 years. What I hope he does is what Ford should have done, which is be the president, stabilize the country, and then say, thanks everybody, I'm out, and have a very comfortable life having done what you did, and don't live to make more mistakes, you know, and you can have a great reputation, you know, for the rest of your life. But
Right?
I mean, he's also elderly, and I think probably that's what he's thinking.
We may see another Trump run in 4 years.
Oh, absolutely, we will.
So I'd say this story is not over. You know,
No.
I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that because 4 years is a long time and Trump is in trouble federally in New York and with his finances. So I really, you know, he's always been delusional. So I think that this is just his delusion. I think he's trying to do it as, okay, I really didn't lose because now I'm going to try again. So this is comforting him
Yeah.
in his egotism to say, oh, I can do it again. I didn't really lose this one.
Yeah. That's very true. I really do think Trump's going to jail. I think the New York Attorney General is just waiting till he's not president to hit him with everything. So I really do think he's going to jail. I think a lot of them are going to jail. The problem that we face is the next sociopath that comes along to exploit that 72 million people is not going to be the stupid, delusional one. It's going to be the really smart sociopath that knows exactly what they're doing and knows how to motivate these people. And, you know, we need a massive public education campaign that you know, is demonstrating what happened the last 4 years and why it was all so awful, because clearly there's a part of the country that just doesn't know it. And they refuse to acknowledge it for ego reasons, right? They were tricked by a con man and they won't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's really funny. If you think about this, the Republican Party today is in exactly the same position as the Communist Party was at the end of the Soviet Union. The leaders of the Communist Party knew, yeah, nothing worked. They knew it was all a mess, but they couldn't admit it, right? They couldn't come out and say, well, yeah, you know, everything we tried since 1917 didn't work, but vote for us anyway, and we'll do better. The Republicans can't do that. They can't go out and say, yeah, you know what, the Reagan Revolution was a catastrophe and it ended in Trump, and, you know, sorry, but vote for us anyway. They can't admit it. So they're going to drag the country down with them out of their ego. And unless we fight back, you know, unless we continue to educate.
I do think there is the issue of racism.
Yeah.
Which is, if one thing we
Absolutely.
learned from the Trump years, that racism is alive and well in the United States, and it's a huge factor. It's a huge factor, and it isn't something you can easily get rid of. I mean, it's something that everyone has to work on, and at all levels of society. And it needs the new generation. And so what I'm really concerned about is how the new generation is voting.
Yes.
And it was, you know, I mentioned this before, but let me just return to it. In Georgia, the Black youth voted in very large numbers for Biden, but the white youth voted in large numbers for Trump.
Mhm.
And so there, you know, that is among the young people in Georgia. And that may be true in many other places across the country, where there is a racial divide and a difference of opinion as to, you know, the relationship between the races. And, you know, that I think that has to be dealt with, you know, in our elementary schools, in our high schools, in our colleges, to try to really work on the problem of racism.
Mm. Yeah, it's a huge challenge.
Mhm.
It's a huge challenge, and the difficulty is the country was built on it. So we're basically like, we got to rip out the planks in the basement, and
Yeah.
you know, So we're rapidly running out of time. I did want to bring up one other person I'd be interested to hear both of your responses to, and that is the unbelievably phenomenal Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Are we not lucky to have her?
Well, she made a huge difference. She
Yeah.
made a huge national difference. Now, Biden could have won without Georgia. He would have won without Georgia. But the Senate is going to turn on Georgia. We're not through with elections yet. We're going to have those 2 senatorial elections in January in Georgia that are going to decide how the Senate's going to go. And Stacey Abrams just did an amazing job in bringing out the vote in Georgia, and it shows what a focused, concentrated effort can do.
Yes, I agree.
How it can make a difference.
I agree.
I feel like this too. Now that we know where we're lacking in votes, like Florida with the Cubans and Latinos, from now on, I think, the Democratic Party is going to really work on that element that we didn't catch, and it's really dangerous. We really have to grab those votes in the next 4 years. So to me, it's like, okay, it's a stepping stone to start for next 4 years.
Yeah. And I think that the essential work of BU votes will go on. And I think we can focus on voter education, civic education, that sort of thing. And, I like, as we said at the beginning, the thirst is there. It's just that they don't know that there's a tap available, and if we show it to them, it makes a difference. And that's really why I'm so proud to have worked with BU Votes. I'm so proud to work with both of you. You're both my friends. And Barbara, you're the first person I met when I washed up at CGS after 4 long years in the wilderness. Which did me some good, by the way. So it did me a world of good. But
it's my pleasure, Sean. You've been wonderful as a co-worker and just amazing, man. You're so dedicated. It's great to see it.
Well, I'm just, I explained to everyone, and I can explain to you that my nephew and nieces are, when I think about all of this and getting people motivated and fixing things, it's like I'm really thinking about them. I can go live in the gutter. I'm fine. I've lived poor. I know how to do it. I'm good. I just, I want, as you do, I want them to have the best country they can have, and for my students too. And so my dear friends, thank you. This is really wonderful. My coffee is gone, so our time is out.
Thank you for having us.
I can't thank you enough for all that you've done.
Thank you.
And we'll be talking soon.
Thank you,
Thank you
Sean.
both.
Take care.